All right. Hello, everyone. We are here again today with another live podcast episode of the Inside Voice podcast, which is part of Voice. You can learn more about Voice at voicesummit.ai and the upcoming event they have June 9th with Voice Global, as well as all the other exciting events they're doing as well. Today, my guest is the Chief Strategy Officer at Voicify. I have Jason Fields with me today. Thanks for being here, Jason.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So for those that don't know a whole lot about you, I'd love for you to talk about how you got into voice. I know you've been in the agency world for a long time, but tell us how you got into voice technology.
Well, it was actually a bridge out of the agency world. Jeff, Bob, and Nick, who are the three primary founders and partners of mine at Voicify, we all had worked at an agency together for years and years, 10 or 15 actually. And when we saw voice start emerging as a new communication channel for brands, we realized that there was going to be a management challenge that would come along with the channel that we had already seen and were helping companies solve through integrated content management systems, experience managers, Sitecore, Adobe, even WordPress, things like that, and how they integrated with other systems like CRMs, PIMs, DAMs, etc. So seeing what we believed and has come true to be a very powerful channel through the voice assistants, we wanted to create a software layer to the management piece of this, because the challenge that we knew was happening, because it used to happen with other digital channels, was that if you wanted to deploy to Google Assistant, you would need a team of specialists for that, and then another team of specialists for Alexa and Bixby and Cortana, and then chatbots. And we wanted to make it easier for brands to be able to bring that conversational experience to market more quickly and be more nimble in their reaction and management of it. And so we used a lot of the tenets that we had learned through the building and integrations of all these other digital systems, including content management, to essentially bring that analog over to the voice channels. And so we set up shop a couple of, years now, really aiming at the enterprise level experience for the large companies that have just distributed teams, which of course everyone's distributed now, but distributed teams and variety of skill sets, because we wanted to put that power in the hands of marketers and experience owners rather than developers.
Yeah, and I love that you all have started to figure out a new way to do something better. That's what it's all about. And we are talking today about how we can kind of take our current content and bring it to voice. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to talk about what the word modality means, especially when we say things that are multimodal.
Yeah, it's a great word to try to unpack, and there's going to be, I think, a lot of chatter about this specifically in 2020. Modality is the idea of sort of one layer of communication. If you're listening to this on a podcast, you're getting an audio modality, something oral. You're hearing us speak. But if you're watching us live or you're watching the recording, you're getting multimodal experience, right? You're actually watching us speak to one another now in a couple of different windows. If we could share a screen, that would be yet another modality that we put on top of it. And then you're obviously hearing us speak as well. So the idea of multimodality is the concept of bringing multiple layers of communication together to support an intention or a goal of communication.
Yeah, and there are three elements of personal communication that you were telling me about. Can you tell me what they are and why they're so important?
Yeah, so historically, when you thought about interpersonal communication or human communication, you thought of these three things: body language, spoken words, and voice or tone. And those three things together create multimodality for a human-to-human interaction. This was not a new concept. This was brought about years and years and years ago by academic thinking. It's been largely adopted and proven correct. But when we think about voice assistants, we don't have a body language because it's typically a device. We have spoken words, of course, and we might have voice and tone, but as we all know, the voices that we're experiencing with Alexa and Google Assistant can get a bit monotonous. Now they're getting better, but still listening to a blog post being read out by Alexa probably isn't the strongest experience that we would all aim for, especially at a brand level. So the idea here that we presented was taking those three elements of personal communication: body language, spoken words, and voice and tone, and sort of converting them into how we would leverage existing assets that brands should already have in their digital ecosystems in order to bring to fruition this channel.
And so we're going to go through, you're going to take us through kind of step by step of how somebody can take a piece of content they already have. Because one of the big questions brands ask all the time is, well, I have a blog, I have a podcast, I have all these things. Do I have to recreate something for voice? And the answer is no, we can take what we already have. So I'd love for you to kind of take us through the process, maybe take us through a specific type of content and how you bring it through voice step by step.
So there's a couple of elements that we sort of bridge the gap between a sort of a high level concept of like meeting the customer where they are, or, you know, right message, right time, right person. When you unpack that concept, what you're really doing is paying attention to a few things. One is you need contextual relevance. Are we talking about the right thing? Understandable and retainable messages, right? Let's not use PhD language for a 5th grade subject. Appropriate forms of communication. Are we trying to use the right modality, the right way of communicating in the right situation, which leads to the last one, which is sensitivity to situation. One of the examples that we had in our paper, and it was a favorite of mine just because up until 6 weeks ago, I was a pretty avid traveler, is that of needing to get on a plane. So if you think about a situation where you need to get onto a plane, usually you're using a couple of different devices, possibly using a couple of different devices to check on things like, is the plane on time? Where's the inbound plane? Those of us that, you know, travel hundreds of thousands of miles a year have have a whole regimen, right? So we're looking up all of these variety pieces of information. But the airline that is going to be giving me this information has the ability to really tailor the information that's being given to me. So if we walk through maybe the few hours leading up to airline travel, you might think of being at home and buttoning up the last few things that you're going to put in your suitcase. And you may ask a voice assistant, perhaps you've got the news on in the background and you're hitting that, you know, Alexa enabled remote, you know, ask United Airlines is my favorite. Ask United where, if my flight's on time. Well, the initial response, or sort of the easy response, is simply for the TV using Alexa's voice to respond to you and say, yes, Jason, your flight to Boston is on time today. But they have this real estate, the television monitor that it's connected to. And so they have the ability to bring in a number of different layers of multimodality. They can repurpose things that are already inside of their ecosystem. Things that they may be displaying on their website or inside of their app, they can repurpose, they can channel into a voice assistant response to really create this hyper-contextual, hyper-personal, hyper-relevant feedback from the voice assistant, which is what we all want. That's the vision of this thing, right? So they may choose to not just give me the oral readout of, yes, your flight's on time, Jason. They may choose to expand on that and give me an update on the inbound plane. They may choose to show me a map of where I'm at, because my TV is registered at an address, so they shouldn't be able to look up where I'm at and be able to tell me it's going to take me 15 minutes to get to the airport. They can even go as far as trying to refer me over to Uber to order a vehicle if I need one at that time, right? Based on their own business logic. They can show me a layout of the terminal. They can highlight my gate. They can give me a preview of what's happening on my plane. What are the in-flight options? What meal should I expect, or should it be available to me? But you take that situation and then you move forward 2 hours. Now I'm in a car going to the airport, and I ask a very similar question, because as we know, these things change, you know, every 15 minutes. Well, if I'm asking my device in my vehicle what the status of my flight is, there's a new context there, right? I'm not in a relaxed area like a living room. I'm not looking at a flat panel television that has all of this real estate. In fact, it's just the opposite. I need less information in order for it to be relevant to me. That information already exists because the airline already knows if my flight's on time, and a very simple response back of yes or no is completely appropriate. Moving forward even further, right now I've gotten through TSA, I'm walking around, I'm getting the coffee, I'm getting the bottle of water for the flight, and I may ask my watch, hey, Alexa, ask United if my flight's on time. Well, now I've got a very small piece of visual real estate, so I can't go to the depths that I had with the flat panel television, but I can still use other information, like perhaps using, GPS, how far away am I from the gate, or how long should it take me to get there? Or is it very quickly thumbs up, thumbs down, green light, red light, is the flight on time, is it not? Because in a busy airport, I may not have the ability to hear my watch from down at my waistline. So if I can get a visual indication of what's happening from the voice assistant, United, then I'm in a much better power to have received the information that I've asked for.
Yeah, I love that you're talking again about this multimodal option, because you're using voice, like you just said with the watch option, but then it's giving you back a visual versus an auditory thing. And I think the more and more we talk about voice, understanding that voice is a piece of the ecosystem versus the only thing. And you just described 3 ways where it makes things more efficient and much easier for the user or the consumer.
That's right. And that's the power of how these voice assistants can be leveraged. You can think of them almost as a virtual representative for any brand. Well, if you were to empower a human being within a call center or even just out in the wild speaking about your brand, they would have a library of assets available to them to use. They would know, because they're using their own sort of critical thinking and intelligence, that they can pull from this library asset and that library asset, and they're gonna put together a narrative to speak about the brand, to offer a solution to the problem that's being put in front of them by whomever they're speaking with. That same possibility exists with voice assistants, albeit there has to be some forethought. That critical thinking needs to be brought into the voice application. Not to plug Voicify too much here, but that was one of the things we tried to solve, was how do we allow brands to organize this level of content, modality, business logic, so that when the moment arises, there's not a dependency on humans to make it happen. The voice assistant is set up with all of these things to automatically deliver.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that, how kind of Voicify works? So my understanding is that you have to have the data somewhere, the answers somewhere, but in the example you just gave with the airline, would they need to have that done differently, or they would need it in one place and then this kind of software can kind of pull it and use it in different ways?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because there's a number of ways that you can go about doing it. I think for more simplistic user experiences through voice, you would probably store a boatload of that information inside of the Voicify system or the voice content management system. When you look at something that's going to be much more dynamic, then what you're essentially doing is you're constructing a set of variables to say, if all of these things are hit, go get the information and bring it back. Because of our history, having done integrations with content management systems, CRMs, PIMs, et cetera, we understood that there were going to be systems of record already inside of an enterprise tech stack. And no IT, no CTO, no CIO is going to be that interested in deploying a new piece of software that doesn't take advantage of the structure they've already worked so hard to set up. So when our product team built Voicify, they built it with a completely open API layer, so that the situation you just made reference to, the status of the airline, the flight that the flight number that you're on, the picture of the terminal, those could all be pulling in from 5, 6, 7 different systems of record, because different teams need access to it or will manage it. So with the open API system we have and the integration and hooks we have, webhooks, we're able to pull those things dynamically, because the variables have already been set inside of Voicify. So at its most basic level, the platform, any content management system, should be leveraged to store as much of the experience as possible. But in its most robust model, a content management system, and Voicify included, is able to leverage systems of record to combine, to assemble responses, sort of like a web page is dynamic and it pulls in all of these things to give you a single display. Voicify does the same thing in a conversational standpoint. Yeah,
and you're a strategy person like myself, and I think one of the challenges I always find with various clients is they're kind of overwhelmed. I have so much stuff. Where do I start? What do I need to give to you or to my team in order to make this work? Do you have any suggestions of how people can kind of organize and compile their content in a way that's going to be effective to allow voice to be a part of their ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that rather than thinking of it from a content is the right way to think about it, but you also want to think of feature and function. So one of the ways that we guide our customers and our agency partners in going about this is to use an existing market set that hopefully everybody has at this point. Its sophistication level will vary. That's the customer journey. If you have something that visually lays out the preferred and prescribed customer journey, even though we all know customers don't follow them the way we'd like them to, you're able to then work through the situations in the journey that the customer may come into that could be benefited and supplemented and reduce friction with the voice channel. Well, that very quickly gives you the initial roadmap of, all right, well, We want the user to be able to ask for the status of their flight, but we don't want them to book their meal, right? We want them to be able to wayfind to the gate, but we don't want them to be able to change their ticket. And when you create a yes and a no list of things in the customer journey that could be voice related or voice supported, then you have the to-do list that can be prioritized. When you prioritize that to-do list or possibilities list within this customer journey, what you're doing is you're by default already, without having written it down, you're creating a punch list of other systems and content that are going to be needed to support those moments in time. So you literally use the top level strategy you hopefully have for the customer experience overall, and you use that to unpack layer by layer all of the elements that are appropriate to voice, finally getting to the level of unpacking all of the assets that are needed. Well, that inventory of assets that are already supporting other moments in the customer journey vis-a-vis other channels becomes the roadmap of, all right, well, yes, we could integrate with a DAM, but it seems like if we're going to do these top 6 things, we really only need a couple of hundred images, and the integration time may put us past our target launch date. So let's take the assets and put them in, say, into Voicify. Then we can go back and do the integration later after we've gotten the POC up and running. Or it may be like, there's no way around it. If we want status on a package, status on an order, status on a flight, like, we got to integrate in there because there's no way to statically manage that piece of information. So it becomes a pretty clear roadmap for people.
Now, one of the things that I think is really important for voice that I've been trying to talk about more is this idea of testing. So how often do you test? What are you testing for to make sure that what you are putting out is working and effective for those that are using it?
It's a interesting question. For business, it seems to be a little bit different. I mean, we recommend, and we find that most of our clients are doing a lot of internal testing first, sort of that soft launch. The discoverability of voice assistants is a hot topic in our world right now. We sort of subscribe to, art of war, make the weakness a strength. So if discoverability is a challenge in the voice ecosystem, but you're doing something that supports customers, then the soft launch is really possible, and you can get a lot of testing done before you actually push it out to market. So internal testing is a big deal, and then obviously looking into the analytics, which is should be a layer of any application that's being run today in marketing or customer experience, which it is with Voicify. So you can gather a lot of, well, which parts of the conversation are working best, which elements aren't working at all. What are people asking us for that we don't have a response for yet? That becomes a de facto product roadmap. Some of those changes are done in an instant. Some of those require bureaucracy and red tape to get through. So it becomes just as much as you're looking at your social analytics and you're looking at your web analytics and you're looking at your call center analytics to figure out what's happening in your business. Voice just becomes another channel for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, recently I was talking with your team about how to use Voicify for creators, for podcasters. And I'd love for you to talk about it from that standpoint as well, because whether you're a creator or you are a brand or a business that has a creative component, you can have the voice be able to choose a certain episode. You can have it say, tell me episodes that entail this topic with this person. You can have videos. There's so many things that can kind of really elevate the content people are creating with podcasting alone.
Yeah, the podcasting is a really great example of a crawl, walk, run approach into voice, because the content is sitting there. You're using it on, Apple Podcasts and Android Podcasts and all these channels people use to subscribe. So it should be a very simple decision for most podcasters and brands to say, well, let's distribute that through voice. I mean, it's a smart speaker, it's a smart display, it's on a television, like everything has an audio format to it. And in your case, you've gotten here into video podcasting as well, right? So there could be a video element to it as well. Because the way those assets, being the podcast, whether it's an MP3, an MP4, whatever it may be, can be indexed and stored specifically by a system like Voicify, there's metadata associated with it, right? So if somebody's going to ask about the Inside Voice podcast with Voicify, well, that's just a piece of metadata. So it would naturally link over to what we're doing right now. And you can some of it's manual, some of it's dynamic in terms of the metadata that's being leveraged. So what we do is you want to make it an opportunity for people to use their own language when they're asking for things. The way that that's a challenge when you're doing things just by tapping code is that you can oftentimes limit the number of variations that you would expect people to say, or the language you would expect them to say, because it's tedious to code option after option after option. So by including metadata and variability into the subject matter of those podcasts, what's happening is we're creating a more dynamic conversation where we're able to catch the information the user is actually intending. So while our platform and our customers are relying on Alexa, Google Assistant, and Bixby to actually do the natural language processing to turn what we're saying into text words that can be processed by a machine, we have another layer of intelligence that has happening behind it, so that if they don't use the exact phrase, we're still going to give you what is the highest likelihood of a response. With podcasting, that becomes very, very straightforward, because people generally aren't doing podcasts or even creating content or distributing any kind of content that's duplicative, because people wouldn't watch it the same thing that's being done slightly differently 2 or 3 different times, right? So each podcast, each piece of content becomes a unique asset.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. It's great. Can you share with us some of the experiences that some of your clients have had from working with you? Because again, as we hear all the time, the question of ROI comes into play.
Yeah.
People are still trying to find use cases that pertain to them. What are they getting from it? How does it improve their business or their connection with their customers? So I'd love for you to share any stories of clients that you have.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning of Voice, it was a novelty play. It was this new, cool, shiny thing that everybody was like, oh, the Jetsons are finally here. Like, this is amazing. Very quickly, when you want to start throwing down cash, it becomes, as you mentioned, an ROI play. And we actually went through an exercise about 30, 60 days ago where we had been tracking the nature of every conversation we'd been having with clients. And so because we wanted to be smarter when we went out and talked with new brands about where they should start. It's not enough to just want to do something that's cool and prove that you can put something on in a voice channel, because not to boast, you can do that in 15 minutes with our platform. So that's not the challenge. The challenge is, how do we make it useful? And what we learned through indexing that was that there's actually 6 primary areas that brands are interested in from an ROI standpoint in bringing something to market. The first is, as you might have expected, the most direct line, commerce. So voice commerce is a really important element of a voice experience, if it's appropriate, right? Nobody wants to hear that every answer to their inquiry is that you have to buy the new pair of shoes. So thinking of it contextually is super helpful, and it's a way to build trust. But voice commerce is big, and with integrations with Amazon Pay, Google Pay, Bixby, or Samsung Pay, all of that is possible. So that's great. The next one, which came up over and over again over the past 24 months, was call center and customer support. So since we're already using a conversation to support our customers through a phone, it made perfect sense to a lot of our customers to start exploring how we would do that with voice assistants, whether you call them tiers of complexity or different levels of interest or whatever your language is around your call center. Usually the lower few layers of that call center paradigm can be solved with a voice assistant, because they're pretty straightforward questions that you don't need to necessarily need a human for. What was interesting is early conversations around call center and customer service was, how do we decrease the call center cost? Because we figured that was going to be the straight up ROI conversation, right? We've done performance for customers where the annual savings in year 1 is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It makes the investment very straightforward. But what we also learned by speaking to a lot of more mature brands was that their interest in using voice wasn't necessarily to cut the cost of call centers, but to allow their call center teams to offer a deeper customer experience, to solve more complex problems, to be able to spend more time on the phone with the customers. Because getting an answer to sort of a low-level inquiry problem is certainly valuable, but taking someone who's having a heightened negative experience and being able to turn it around into a positive, which takes time, can be even more valuable. So we thought that was really interesting. Another one that came up was employee engagement. So, we think of Alexa and Google Assistant and Bixby as being consumer facing. Like, all right, well, if I'm not selling something and I don't want people to be able to use my product better and they're a consumer, then why would I use it? But we actually have a lot of organizations, and actually with the pandemic that we're all experiencing, a lot of organizations are coming to us and saying, we're sending out sometimes 3-4 emails a day about what's going on and our reaction and what's happening, because we want to be over communicative. But we're finding that the primary channel of delivery is email. Well, that's burdensome. That's a lot of information for people to get through. And what we are able to offer in this particular instance, but in general, is a dedicated chatbot using like Microsoft Teams or Slackbot or other collaboration tools, where each chatbot could even have its own subject expertise. So if you want to ask the brand COVID bot questions about what's happening with this particular pandemic, that would be where you would go, versus you could use an HR bot to say, how many days of vacation do I have left? Do we get Columbus Day off? Like, there's a lot of things that can not just make your employees feel good, but also save a boatload of time for other members of your organization by putting that into an automated conversation. There's one we just talked about, which we call media distribution. Podcasts are certainly a really big subject to that, but we actually are in conversations with TV stations, radio stations. Even now, there's a lot of upcoming concerts and events that we're probably not going to be able to do the same density experience that they typically have had. They want to be able to conversationalize that, so you not only are listening to the media that's being distributed, but you also have the ability to start interjecting questions and asking things of the brand and asking things of what you're seeing through the media. Another one is account management, sort of closely related to call center and customer service, but the ability to manage your preferences and get updates and change things about the way the brand thinks of you just by talking to it, rather than having to like log in, key things in, hit save. It literally becomes a conversation. And then the last one that sort of excites me the most is the idea of marketing campaign support, which is the ability to put something out there into the world, from a marketing standpoint, from an experience standpoint, and then allowing someone, a tool like Alexa or Google Assistant, to be supportive in that. You're moving them from one channel to another. It gives the brands a lot of really great information, how well a campaign is working. Because if you move somebody over into a piece of a conversation in voice, you can create it so uniquely that it only is applicable if somebody saw the ad or the marketing campaign or the piece, right? So you get did it work? Yes, it worked. We have 1 million impressions and we got 900,000 people asking the question. So it works really well for marketing campaign support as well.
Yeah, and I just, we've spoken before, but now having you on the show, I love that you and your team really do a lot of research and really do a lot of listening to what's going on to adjust your platform so that it is helpful in the right ways, like you said, the right use case. Can you, for those that don't know, talk a little bit about what Voicify is, what it does, like who should be using it within the brand or the voice world?
Yeah, of course. So Voicify, as you probably have gleaned already, is essentially a voice content management system. So it's software, it's SaaS, lives in the cloud, available through a web browser. There's really nothing to download, because everything that is voice related is up in the cloud anyway. There's no need to download and install any sort of software in your own system. And it becomes an interface for you to manage what your expected conversation is going to be with your user. And this is one of the questions that comes up with prospects and customers quite a bit, which is, well, what if they show up and they ask things we don't have answers for? Well, there's steps that we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, right? First is we can tell them what to expect when they get here and talk to us. They're not going to just randomly start asking Nike what the weather is going to be like in Eugene, Oregon. So we can help manage that expectation from a marketing standpoint. But that also gives you a lot of great intelligence, because if everyone's asking you what the weather is, like, hey, let's give them an answer. Because if they come back every day and ask us what the weather is, we can start guiding them down another conversation that's valuable to them, but also to us. So the software, the interface is we kept the look and feel of existing content management systems that most people are probably already familiar with. The WordPresses, the Sitecores, the Adobe Experience Managers, the Epi servers of the world. So it's form-based with a very light canvas interface to show you what is coming and what's possible and how things are linked together. And we give you all of the control to be able to say, hey, I've got images for 90% of my conversation. I'm missing 10%. What we wanted to do was take the sort of the question away from the content manager or the experience manager about, well, not only are there sort of 4 major assistants, some might argue 3, Bixby, Alexa, and Google Assistant. Not only is there that variable, which we deploy to all 3, so we solved that problem, right? Build it once, deploy to many. But there's billions, literally billions of devices. My computer has an assistant on it. The fridge has an assistant on it. My watch has an assistant on it. My phone, my car. And that's just my ecosystem. People have smart speakers, smart displays. People have alarm clocks with the assistant built in. So how is the end user supposed to keep track of all of that variability? Well, that was the next level problem that we solved. You give us as much of the content as you have, and we're going to optimize it for the device that's requesting it. So if you have a video that is an appropriate response to somebody's inquiry, but they ask it from their car, we're not going to show them the video because we don't want people watching videos while they drive. And if somebody has a question that's very easily answered with just audio on a device that's has a display, but you've inserted imagery that could be used from a background image or a foreground image, we're going to display that, even though the simplest answer might just be to hear it, right? So we're going to leverage the modalities that are available, optimize the modalities that are available per device, because just like when you request a web page, you're telling the server what web browser you're using, so it knows how to optimize and fit the code in there. The voice assistants are doing the same thing with the skills and actions that you're authoring through Voicify.
Yeah, no, I love it. And again, I'm really excited by how you all are continuing to do the research and really push ahead and ask questions to improve what you guys have created. So where can people learn more about what we talked about, or if they want to connect with you, how and where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jay Fields at Voicify.com. Voicify.com, obviously, you could go to sales@voicify.com and get you in touch with our sales team. They'd be excited to get some emails from all of you out there. You can follow me on Twitter, Interactive JJ. I'm on LinkedIn. At Voicify is our company Twitter handle as well. And we have a pretty active LinkedIn conversation going as well. So all of the usual places.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This has been really informative and helpful for those that are thinking about how to kind of take the content they already have, getting started, and they can always come and ask you questions for anything they have. So thank you so much for being here, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and keep doing the podcast. It's great.